Today, we're honored to sit down with respected elder, veteran, and longtime leader in our community, J.R. Holmes. Our guest has dedicated much of his life to serve the tribe in many roles. He's also a proud veteran who continues to serve today by staying active in the Veterans Committee and representing the tribe as a veterans flag carrier, even enjoying time on the golf course with fellow veterans. JR talks about time growing up, the importance of family, as well as being involved in the fight against the Crandon mine that would have impacted the Wolf River and much of Wisconsin. Now, as he approaches 81 years old, he remains active, involved, and committed to his community. We're honored to have him here today to share his story, his experience, and his wisdom. Let's welcome him to the show. This is Journey Together.
We remember who we are through the smoke, through the sound. Our heartbeat carries on, stand strong. Voices rise from the earth to the sky. Nishinaabe, Nishinaabe, Bodewanami.
All right, we're here with J.R. Holmes. Hi, J.R. Can you give us a little introduction about who you are?
Good afternoon. Pleasure to be here. My name is James Holmes Jr., and my Indian name is Shiganabik, which means grindstone. And how I got that name is I was a little guy like your little guy there, and I used to help my grandpa turn the wheel, the grindstone, and he would sharpen his axe. And then next thing you know, I was called Shiganabik, and that's how I was answered to every time they called me. So that was quite a few years ago, good 80 years.
Wow.
Yeah. So I can see it perfectly, Grandpa and myself and Graham standing by the door of the house. That's where Gilligan lives now. My house, my living used to be there. At one time, I almost made a complete circle coming back once I left to get education, and I was moved by social services. I went to Winnebago Indian School. That's where I started to learn a little bit more about powwows and things like that. And then when I never did get to come back, because the Army got a hold of me then down the road after I graduated from high school. And that's how when I came back home, then I entered gaming. Gaming is what really helped us get the homes for the tribe. So when it was opened up to purchase or build on a property, Gilligan beat me to it, Donnie. And then they finally got a home to buy, and it was right next to where I was supposed to be. So I'd complete circle. I almost made it. I still can get the property if he's willing to sell. So, but that's how I got to really come back. I always wanted to work in social services anyway, and help kids, families. I went to school for that, Nicolay and Nielsen, and that kind of stuff like that, and travel around, seeing a lot of families and so forth. And then it showed me how much help they needed, in social living and so forth. Not that I could be a difference if I went to school for that. But it ended up they helping me. Made me into a person that I could be, able to live through life and be proud of myself. So it's been a long, long trip, seems like. There's so many different things. You became old enough to go fight in a war, and I used to think about that when I was over in Nam. When I get out of here, I'm going to have a name. I'm going to have. I was in the service. I was in the Army. I had done some things that nobody else can do on the outside. When you're in the Army, you defend your brother next to you, and you defend your country. So that means you're doing something that was pretty harsh to somebody else. I always respected those people over there a lot because they didn't do nothing to me, and then we, as the United States government, they always want to get into something. So that's how I got into service. And but I never wanted to go upgrade. I mean, it's like E5. I stayed as a specialist in the Army because E5 was then you're leading a platoon going into the jungle, and you're first to get wiped out. Even radio people. And then when you're a radio, I was glad to be a radio guy, but then somebody told me, they want to knock out the radio. Got rid of that right away,
Yeah.
And then I did flanker on both sides of the platoon. When you march down, there's the main body, you have flankers. They walk along with you. They wipe those people out too and say, I think I'll stay with the platoon, and do my thing there. But that was pretty close going too at one time. But I made it back. I really thank the Creator that I made it back, but that was something. It was worse living over here than being out over there. You always had to watch your back when you were back in the States. So.
Yeah, I want to thank you for your service. That took a lot of courage to go through all those years of service, and we definitely appreciate your service.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for that introduction as well. I really appreciate you letting us know what your Indian name means and how much it means to you.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us a little bit more about what it was like when you were growing up?
Okay, I started out over there at Soperton. That's where my parents and grandparents lived, and that's where I lived, out on County Road C. And growing up I was just talking about this too, that I didn't see any difference or loneliness, or that I didn't have anything. You rarely have the clothes, you didn't have any shoes and stuff like that, but you enjoyed where you live with your family, it just was that way. And so you kind of liked the place, or you loved the place where you were growing up at. But I was bused to Wabino School when I was in third grade. And I was in second grade too, first grade. I got bused to Lincoln High School. That's the school that we went to. It was a Lincoln and there was a Washington in Wabino, and I went to Lincoln. All of us tribal kids went there. And I got to third grade, but my cousin Ray, he moved out first. They picked him up and took him to a group home type. Well, in the meantime, I was still going to school there, and when I reached third grade, they came after me, and they took us to a place in Hillsville called the Winnebago Indian School, and it was kind of neat. It was good. I mean, it was home, and it was security, and it was things you learn. When they put us there, they weren't really bad to us there, and but they just never let me come back home. To visit, it'd be very, very long in between times to come home and visit, see grandma and grandpa and mom. So I never really got to visit them, and then they passed,
Mm-hmm.
So when I was in third grade, I went to fourth grade, and they came after us again. This time they took us down to Neilsville, south of Marshville, and there's a big group home there. It was really huge building, girls on one side and boys on the other side. And we got there, and we had routines that we had to follow every day, And one other thing they asked us, what would you like to do? So the first time I seen a lot of cows, and I seen those cows, and they had a big barn. I said, I want to work in there. Okay, you have to get up at 5. And yeah, it's no problem. So I worked as a potato peeler and then went out to the farm and did all that good stuff for a long time, and then, but it wasn't all that kind of work. There was also a lot of different things in between. Sports, and sports was introduced to me, and that's where things took off for me. And we had a basketball team called the Braves, and it was little bitty guys, but I didn't know discrimination, at that time. When we was going to school at Lincoln and Wabino there, they always used to march us to the high school, and then we'd get our shots, booster shots and stuff like this, and that's the first time they held the shots in a big gym. All those little Indian kids all lined up, all getting our shots, screaming and everything. Those little big shots, boy, jeez. And then that's the first place I saw a basketball court and a basketball. And I didn't know what it was for or anything like this. But after I went to Newsville and got into grade school there, kindergarten, grade school, that's where I really got to get into sports and different living. And they took us around. They treated us pretty good until I got into ninth grade. Ninth grade, I got up to ninth grade, made it there. And then from there, I went to high school in Neillsville. And I ended up running into a Christian family. I was Jack Grether. He was the minister of the Indian school. And his son was the same age as me. And we kind of got together, and we liked the same things, sports, working with kids and stuff like that. So I always called him my blood brother. And that for years now, 4 years, I went to school there and we were doing all kinds of stuff. And we came back to work at the Indian school to help the kids. And then I was an artist. I was the artist, so I had a arts and crafts drawing class for them. And Tim, his name was Tim Grether, he learned to be a social worker by just being there with the Indian kids and the home and the things that his dad did. He was a minister and everything else, but also social service. But it was really interesting because I got to run into, they call it the Winnebago Indian School, and that because it was mostly Winnebagos that was supposed to be going to school there, but it was the Manams, Potawatomis, Oneidas, and Chippewas that were all going to school there. And we learned from each other some languages and stuff and how they lived and we lived and so forth. And then we had a good basketball team. And our whole chunks, they loved to play.
Yeah.
So we got all that good stuff. And then one day I got a letter from home. It was from my grandma. And so I always remember this. I was sitting on the hill with Joyce White Wing. She's a whole chunk from Wittenberg. And I got this letter and I was sort of kind of reading it, but I didn't really understand it. So I gave it to her to read it. And she was reading it to me and it said in there, this is the letter I was writing back to my grandma. And it says, Grandma, I got a bunch of girlfriends. I told them, and they're all playing around, having a good time and stuff like that. And but right after that, my grandma passed, and then I had nobody. There was nobody around except for compadre. But compadre was taken out of the Indian school and brought back to Leona, or really to Stone Lake. Then Leona, and he was in a group home there, and so when I got old enough to be in a senior year, I was able to leave, and I got put into a home, foster home in Stratford, Wisconsin. I spent my last year there, senior year at Stratford. I could not, I was good in basketball, but it seemed like fate was always ahead of me. And I was always trying to catch up. So I said, oh, good, now I'm going to be able to play basketball for a school or a town, the NCAA. WIA basketball thing. Well, so when I got to go and enroll to play basketball for Stratford Tigers, they come back with a letter saying that I couldn't play. And I says, why? Well, you're too old. He said, your birthday is in April, and school year is ends in November. So when you go into the next year, they count those 4 months or 3 months as you're already up to the next year level. So I was moaning and crying and everything else. I couldn't play, but I made it to graduated from there and went on to school in New Mexico, and that's where I was able to fine tune my artwork. Because when I knew I couldn't play basketball at Hillsville, I was doing block printing and silk screening and stuff like that in my room. And for this minister who traveled Ohio and Iowa, he was ministering, and he would take material that I printed and take it down with him. And he says, well, when we sell this, we'll give you half the money. Really? No, cool. Never happened. I never seen no money. They went and sold it or did something. I never seen my artwork in any place from all the travelings I did, because I always went to arts galleries and stuff, and just because I liked it. Mm-hmm. Then from Neelsville, I got accepted. I got accepted in a college in New Hampshire. It was an art school, and in there's another Oberlin College. Oberlin College in Ohio never accepted me, and then there was the time of the draft of Vietnam going on, and so here goes me scrambling to try to get into college so I don't have to get drafted. Mm-hmm. So I went to Eau Claire State. I applied there. At that time it was Eau Claire State. I applied there, and then I went to Minneapolis to apply up there, and what was they call it? College, is that only 2-year college type thing? They wouldn't take me. So the next thing I do was I was marching 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. I got drafted in the service just because they didn't accept me in a college. Mm. I had all the backing and everything and grade level to be in it, but they didn't take me because at that time you didn't know it, that they were, kind of segregating us and that kind of stuff. So my whole platoon was Mexicans and natives, and stuff like that. So I didn't make it. So I had to go to the service. Fort Campbell, Kentucky is where I did the boot camp. Fort McCullough was advanced training in jungle fighting in Alabama. And then from there, I came back home. And then I had to report to Fort Ord, California. I should be shipped out to Vietnam. That was in the 3rd of the 4th of the 9th Division. And then I was F-11. That's infantry. And so I went there 2 years, and my goodness, it went by quick, but it was pretty close. So when I came back home, I went to college, and I stayed in Minneapolis and become a complete silk screener for computers, for chassis of all kinds of things. I did that stuff, and that kept me alive. But there was always a tribal affiliation of upper higher education. There was a tribe there. There was that funding that the government had, that they sent kids to go in. And they also gave me housing, for a year. And then they gave me money for education and that stuff. And that made me to Minneapolis, Minnesota at the time. But sports was always a thing. And I was playing sports. That kept me clean, no drugs, no stuff like that, because I just love sports and that. But after that, my heart was into my people because I wanted to go help them out. So I got my education in sociology, and I came back home, and I wanted to set up housing for the kids going to college and set up transportation. And I sat before council back then. It was Lois and Louis Shepard, and he's his brother, Louis Shepard, and he had a brother. I can't remember his name. Anyway, they were on the board, and Jim Thunder was chairman at the time. And they asked me, they say, JR, are you sincere about coming to do this? I said, of course I am. I'd hitchhike from Minneapolis to here to visit my families and stuff,
Oh.
and then I would go try to get situated with the council and stuff to see what I can do. Finally, when I really came back and stayed, I was able to wear a couple of hats for the tribe, and then doing things like weatherization, HIP, housing improvement and stuff like this. And then I was also the coordinator for mining corporation, coordinator for the tribe. And that taught me a lot too. But if it wasn't for the tribe, I really don't know where I would have been,
Mm-hmm.
And I always thank the tribe when they helped me out. I would always write a letter to them and thank them for helping me out, and even in the housing and that stuff so it helped a lot for me to continue to live and carry on. But after that, mining came in for a while, and then I got hired for the gaming, not the gaming at the time, but for they wanted me to run a smoke shop in Milwaukee. So cool. I never sold anything. I did work Minneapolis. I did work as a salesperson, and stuff like that. So I know how to deal with people and that kind of good stuff. So they shipped me down there, and I stayed down there, housing for us, and all I had to do was get to work. And I was always at work, so there was no problem there. And then finally I started to learn more and more about the business. And one of the first place I got fired was from that job. And then I said, now what am I going to do? Go home, I guess, be with the family. But I didn't stay long for the family. I ended up dealing cards for Carter.
Mm-hmm.
And so I worked there for about a year. Then there comes a letter, sign-up sheet for becoming a gaming commissioner. So, awesome, I'll try this, So I signed my name, they interviewed me, and I got the job, and I was in gaming for almost 25 years then, maybe 30, off and on too, replacing other people who would quit or something. And that was really reason why that gaming was really good for me is back when I was in Minneapolis, I was wanted to be a state bird, state officer, state cop. I was wanted to be one of those. So I applied for that. I had all questions in there, and I signed it and everything else. And they wrote back, well, we can't hire you. Oh, why not? You got too much education. I said, what? For being a cop? I said, well, I wanted to be one. Okay, they couldn't have that. So I ended up going into my background of silk screening and doing all this stuff in Minneapolis for the rest of about 7 years. And then I'd come back here, back and forth, checking homeland out and stuff like that, and then go back. But you always want to come home. You always want to know who you are and stuff. I didn't know who I was for many, many years until I went to New Mexico. They had classes there, authenticity, some kind of class that has to do with who you were and who you belong to. Mm-hmm. And I read this book this one lady gave me, and I read it, and it said Potawatomi in there, and the keeper of the fire. That's where I found out who I was then. So coming back home, I know where I belong, so I came back, and here I stayed. Really enjoyed it. So it was those kind of things that really help individual young, you try to teach your kids, your grandkids that, remember who you are, how you feel about who you are when you're with your people. You be nice, courteous, and respectful, and that my kids, I try to tell them the same, but it seems like they're way off in left field all the time, They'd rather be over there and fight in society. So that's how I became who I am today. I was in the service and that was a forceful thing there. Go to service. I just mentioned to my other half, because they're fighting over Iran. I said, sign me up. I'll go over there. Just joking around, stuff like that. So, well, I appreciate, this kind of thing happening. There's so much going on in our reservation, in our community, for all the kids to be able to be touched by, and they will make it. And if we keep pushing our elders, pushing our, wisdom to them, and they'll come around. Mm-hmm. That. So, amen to that.
Yeah. Yes. That was a really good recap of your history and where you originated from, and what your beliefs are, and your passion to come back to our community and serve your community is very honorable. Do you have any people that were big influences for you? I know you talked about your compadre. Was there anybody else that was an influence on you to make sure you were bettering yourself in sports and in your service? Were there any family members that you really looked up to?
Well, when they found a place for us back here in Stone Lake, we used to stay with the Georges, Ike George and Mary George. And they put us in a group home there, and it so happened Kenny George Sr. was always around. And he was always seems like 2 big steps ahead of me. And he'd ask me to, do you want to go play ball? And, oh, yeah, okay, I'll do it. And then I'd go follow him, and we'd go play ball and things like that, and he was like a big brother to me, he'd always kind of stick up for me and stuff like that. And he was a Marine. And he came out too as a Marine sergeant. And his ma, Mary, reminded me of my grandma. Mary was so great. She was such a beautiful person. Ike was the worker, and that he spoke to us and stuff like this and that stuff. But I always admire him because he was working on the outside as a guide, fishing guide and that stuff. He put his foot out there, and he just go and do his things and work with the outside and that, and then he'd come back, and I always remember him too. And that, Kennedy was the only one that really kind of, if he wanted somebody to come along with, he'd ask me to come along with. Because I remember one time Jim Turner was chairman, and Kenny was, I don't know if he was vice, but they had this Great Lakes meeting up in Flambeau, and big Bill Wildcat, and he was the chair of the Glick thing. And then we had a meeting down in Ho-Chunk country, down there in Black River. And so I go down there with him, and actually I was doing notes too, and stuff. And they had all these requests that came in from the different tribes. One tribe needed this, one tribe needed that, the money to split up what they got. And here comes Bad River. And I think it was Louis Taylor that was the chairman then. And he stood up, he says, I'm asking for monies to be able to fix up our roads because he was from Bad River. He says, and we got bad roads. He said to the committee there in Alice. So I always took it like, yeah, you're from Bad River. Yeah, you got bad roads, all right, and stuff like that. And that's where I met a lady from New York, and I seen her on TV. Her name was Miss Simmons. She was coming. She caught me in the hallway, and she came up to me and started talking to me, and I recognized her right away, and she was from that TV show. And she said, how come they don't let us in? All we want to do is ask them about their health and the way they live, and maybe we can do a little, but they never invite us in. I said, well, I guess they're not used to. They just don't have just somebody come over and then look in their house and everything else, because we have pride too in how we live, and stuff like that. And she was telling me, geez, you think you can take me to one of the houses I can go and talk to the people? I said, well, I'm not from this tribe, so I don't know which one I could go to, and stuff like this. But if you were up here, you can come visit me, I told her. Mm-hmm. And the next thing, about a week later, she was on TV talking about that meeting that they had down there on TV. And that's so those things kind of like, when Ken took me along, I met other people, stuff like that. So gaming was another one that was just awesome to be working, because you meet tons and tons of really good Native American people out there. They're doing wonderful things for their people and other people. So that's how I got my be able to meet people, and all you have to do then is remember those things, if you could, Yeah. And then you're okay, because you can jive right up to them, and start rapping with them.
You had a lot of great experiences throughout your life. What would be one that makes you proud and that you can think of that you would want to speak about?
So there were so many different things that I always talked about with my kids. But the only issue I kind of had was that a lot of people that I knew and worked with, they had a memory. They could remember things and stuff like that. And it seems like, no, I don't remember that. I was there. No, I don't remember that. So a lot of the good things I wanted to teach about. One of the things I wanted to do is I wanted to speak. I always wanted to, when you had auditorium get together in school, everybody come to the gym and you sit in the bleachers and then you talk to them. I always wanted to talk to the kids that way. And I always wanted to talk to, with the help of the elders, talk to our people sitting in the bleachers. And I always wanted to tell them some things about ethical things, and look to your left, there's your friend right there. Look to your right, there's your other friend right there. Treat them fairly, treat them good, and that you all should be friends. I always told my kids, you brothers, you always stick together. You can always rely on each other and stuff like that. I would tell my two boys.
You talked a couple of times about your grandma. Can you tell me what she was like and how important she was to you?
Yeah, Grandmama. Yeah, she was one of the greatest persons in my life. I mean, women back then were tough. They were kind and tough. And Grandma and Grandpa were survivors. And my grandma, she was so kind. I always thought she was my mom. I call her mom all the time, and then my uncles would say, she's not your ma. I said, sure is, she is my ma. And she said, no, she not. She is, going back and forth with my uncles. And I didn't understand between the grandma and the ma, I didn't know the barrier there. But yeah, she was a beautiful woman. And so was my grandpa. He was great. But, like kids, sometimes I would tease my grandpa, me and compadre. and that. So he took a gun after us. When we seen that 22, boy, we flew. We took out and never came back until he sobered up. So, and little things like that, different things you see and remember those things. But she was totally, totally awesome. But I lost her. So I really don't know where she's at. And I tried to look for her for 2 years. And then, you know, where her site is. Never did find it. Now you see yourself getting to that age, you know, and you think about, you know, oh, when is your time, you know? And as long as you're doing well and you feel good, you'll be here until you're ready, you want to go. And that's what I feel in the future.
Thank you for sharing that with us. I really appreciate hearing about your grandma and grandpa and how you grew up and all your different adventures out there and the people you've influenced, and for you to come back home and help us for the community. I think that's what we've been taught from our ancestors and our grandparents, to go out there and explore and come back and benefit your tribe and make us stronger as a tribe. So I want to thank you again for that and for your dedication and your service for all of us. One question that I have is kind of a different one compared to what we've been talking about. We know that you love golf. Can you tell us a little bit more of like what you do in your free time? You golf, you love sports.
That's one of the things that's made me survive with sports through all my life. And I was like 6 years old. Mentioned Winnebago Indian School. That's where I started to play and know about sports. Not to mention that my blood brother, Tim Grether, was in a position to pull me out of Winnebago and I can go play with different teams with him. And that made me feel pretty good about somebody does want me to do this and do that. But one of the things was softball, baseball, football. And then when I came back here with the Shaunos and the other groups, all the ways, we ended up playing a lot of volleyball too and different things, different times, and that took up the winter months and stuff. But talk about golf is, I always tell buddies of mine, I could have kicked myself many years ago to play more golf back in the days. Because like I did with softball, it was every day, seems like, you know, and yet golf was sitting out there until I couldn't run anymore and I had my knees fixed, and then I was able to turn to some other sport, and it was golf and bowling. So golf was one of the main things that I wish I would have played a lot longer ago. I would have been a really good player. And then right now it seems I've been catching up on golf. Now I'm with this right knee I just got fixed 3 months ago. Is I got to test it, see if I can do better this year. It's going to be busy this year, so I'm really looking forward to it. And that sport was the one I really loved. And I always advocated for ladies, because on my team there's always usually 2 ladies playing, and then no matter what golf tournament it is, you would love to win it, but you still have the ladies that want to play too, and you should have them, pick them up. All they have to do is putt. You don't always have to hit the ball. We'll do that.
Yeah.
Get to the green, and my other half there, she's a real good putter, and she can hit the ball and do that. But she is the one that makes the putts for us, so that's like 80% of the playing time. So, and that's what about covers my remaining time now is golf.
Yeah. So if you had one thing that you wanted to express to our youth or anybody looking for advice, what would be one thing that you would say for advice for our youth or anybody that wants to be inspired?
Well, in art, I always told my boys, if you buy something, buy it that is tribal art. And that's me, like, say they like Nikes, and I don't care for Nike at all. And so I tell them, how come you got Nike on? I got that at Goodwill. I said, it's only $9, you know. And one of the things is to, in art, I would say art is, you do your art, and you do tribal stuff, you get more spirit out of it, you know, because it's your people and ancestries and everything else is in those paintings and what you did. That's how they did it, you know, and they did their artwork. Because when I went to Indian school, and I went to Institute of American Indian Arts in Santa Fe, and it's an art school, and that's how I got into knowing what I was supposed to do. And it was always tribal art. And if you do that, you're thinking, you're feeling more of it. And I always tell my boys too, you're going to read a book, pick a tribal book, and stuff, and read about it. And so we pushed some books on them, you know, for them to read and that kind of stuff. So that's one of the things that they should really do is they're playing on their games, pull up a book, read a tribal book, go through that and see, and then tell me about it, you know.
Yeah.
So that's what I would offer them. And like all the programs we got here, we gotta push them to some that they sometimes, I don't want to go, I don't want to go. Well, just go and do it. At least you didn't choose this one or this one. Just choose one that you think you like and do it. And on the road, you'll probably go on your own then.
So I think you did a really good job recapping everything that I had for questions, but is there anything that you want to bring up or discuss that we haven't already discussed?
We have a couple of things that is troubling our community in regards to the young kids that are growing up. And mental health is one of the things that I always been trying to advocate to families. One was autism, you know, and that I didn't know it. I didn't know what it was. I knew the word, and I knew it wasn't a disease. And it came from the family that how they treated their kids when they were small. And then if a kid didn't answer you, you know, there was no reason for you to get mad or scold them, holler at them. You give them time. I didn't know this until my grandkids. I was taking care of my grandkids, and I learned this one day, and from one of them, because I was studying him, you know, because when I asked him a question, he wouldn't answer, and yet 5 minutes later he'd come and he says, "Gramps, this is the answer to this. Would you ask? Why did you take you so long?" Well, I didn't know it then. He says. But they come up with it because they got the brain sword, you know, and I learned that to be real patient with them and try to go along as much as you can with getting them to understand that, yeah, we don't understand how you're thinking. You have to give us something. And then those kind of things. And then you'll have in the health world, we have issues with our outside providers and health. They don't know who we are and how we think and stuff like that. And when one of our kids come to them, they have issues. They're supposed to go through these programs that they got to find out where they're standing and thinking and stuff like, especially mental health. Well, we got whiffed of one area that didn't give the right help and didn't understand the right help that the kid needed. And it was registered that this person was suicidal. And they didn't follow up to go beyond that and let the police know or the other departments know that, hey, we got this kid here that might be this way, so let's work on him this way. They just pushed him off, and they gave him drugs and stuff like that, and that made it even worse. So those kind of things that we can go out there when if we have that attorney, we need good attorneys for those things because they got to fight these big hospitals and clinics and stuff like that because they're all going to back each other and that. So when that we were this close to suing company because of my grandson passed away that way, and he was trying to find help, and he went to it, and he wouldn't divulge it because at the time we find out that he was having these big issues, he turned 18. So 18, he has a right to not to tell you anything if you don't want to. And 18, they should know. If you say 21 is drinking, well, you can move it up to 20. Or, I mean, you can bring it back to 17, or you can move it to 18, that he has to tell the parents what's happening to him, what he went through, and stuff like that. So that's the kind of thing that I think we should push a little bit more, reevaluate our departments and what they should look at and what they should follow through more. Of course, the hardest one is the one you want to follow through with because they're the ones that's causing the problems with our kids having issues that way. So is the health, I guess.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that out because I think that's a very important topic for our youth, for our elders, and all ages. It's important to take care of your mental health and well-being. I think we're good.
Yeah, well, thank you very much and kindly for asking me to come here and kind of spill the beans. So. But yes, it's one thing that's really helpful here. We can get stuff out and that.
Yeah, I'm grateful for you to be here and for your wisdom. And like I said, again, your service to our community and our country. I really appreciate you. Thank you for this time.
Thank you.
Good.
From the fire, from the drum, we remember who we are. Through the smoke, through the sound, our heartbeat carries on. Stand strong, voices rise from the earth to the sky. Neshanabe, Neshanabe, Bode Wadami, Neshanabe.